the whole domain of our human existence, over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Politica Christiana podcast live stream number 3. We're kicking it off early because I can, because I feel like it. Not doing anything else right now. You can make fun of me all you want. My buddy Seth Dean, who you guys know from The Battle and the Bride and from Doctrines of Grains podcast, he was like, dude, we got to get you like a mic stand so you don't have to hold the mic. Well, here we are still. So this is why your support matters, folks. I still look silly, but not from the if you're on YouTube, you're with us on YouTube, which we finally got figured out, I think. Let me know. Let me know if we actually got that or not. I know we're on Twitter again. And with respect to Instagram, yeah, the folks on Instagram could see that I'm physically holding this mic, so I look a little bit like a goober. But today, hey, we got good stuff. We'll as always, announcements. Today, topic of the day, and then foreign policy. So, announcements. Today was actually supposed to be a much cooler episode. We've got some cool things planned. The live stream next week, and/or it might be pre-recorded. It just depends on their schedule. We were supposed to today have one of the state congressmen, state representatives, who was one of the co-sponsors on the bill we're going to cover. He was supposed to come on today and discuss this Christ is King resolution for North Dakota. That'd be North Dakota Congressman Nico Rios. So be excited for that. Get ready for that. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first. It was going to be a complete surprise. He was going to come on the show today, but they are doing a lot today. We'll talk about that in a second. North Dakota is busy with good legislation. So mark your calendars next week. It should be a live stream, could be pre-recorded. Either way, you will get an episode next week with North Dakota Congressman Nico Rios talking about the legislation he's working on, his team's working on in North Dakota about the Christ is King resolution, which will be today's topic. They're going through today. I'm sure some of you saw that there was, of all people, not a raging liberal or some kind of Democrat, but a Catholic spoke against an equal protection bill today in North Dakota. So they were very busy. We'll get into that. But as always, I almost forgot. Disclaimer, as always, my opinions are my own and not that of the United States Navy or Department of Defense. These views are my own. So that'll be today's topic. Other announcements include, let's see, we got all the pre-orders out for the Christiana America flags. So thank you guys so much. I should have just shared that image with you guys on the first camera, but the basically an American flag, but instead of the 50 stars, right, it's a Jerusalem cross. We've got those pre-ordered thanks to you guys' support, and those will be in the works for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and hopefully we'll get them out to you guys ASAP. And if you didn't make the pre-order cutoff, we will still have 25 more at our disposal to get rid of. If you want one, let us know. DM me on Instagram, X, comment on YouTube. Let me know that you want one. Let's see what other announcements we got. We put out a couple of days ago, and I think last live stream, that again, we have some pretty massive interviews coming up, especially since we are an itty bitty podcast. We've got Navy officer, reserve officer, that is Michael Cassidy from Satan slaying fame. That was the guy who beheaded the Baphomet statue in Iowa. We will be interviewing him at some point in the next month, as well as both Stephen and William Wolf for our season 1 finale. You should get really excited about that. We're going to be talking about the next pan-Protestant political order. So very, very, very stoked about that. I was very, very surprised that either one of them said yes. But here we are. So that, get really, really excited for that. And of course, we have other interviews in the works as well, in accordance with the season 1 episode list, and some bonuses. We have some other bonus episodes coming up, like the Nico Rios interview. So anyway, getting to today's topic, I think that's, unless anyone has any questions, that is all the announcements. I'm checking all the chats, I think. But those are all the announcements for right now. Today's topic is House Concurrent Resolution 3020 in North Dakota. Why should you care about this? If you did not hear via Twitter or the news, probably CNN freaking out, the state of North Dakota wants to acknowledge formally through their state government that Christ is king over the world, over this nation, and over North Dakota. So, pretty awesome stuff. Let's jump right into it. Introduced by goodness, almost a dozen representatives. Like I said, we'll be interviewing the first one who's listed on the resolution. That is North Dakota Congressman Nico Rios, who is also an oil field worker. You should totally check out his Twitter. It's super based. I was like tweeting the heck out of him this past week. His handle is at oilfield underscore. No, that's not right. I don't know. You'll find him. Nico Rios. Go find him. North Dakota congressman. It's something like oilhead or something. He's an oil field worker, so he's a blue collar guy. He's got an awesome Twitter. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into this resolution. A concurrent resolution urging North Dakota to acknowledge the kingship of Jesus Christ. Whereas Christ said, all power is given to me in heaven and in earth, Matthew 28:18. Not only spiritual, but civil, including over this great state. And whereas Christ is said to have received power and glory and a kingdom so that all peoples, tribes, tongues shall serve him, Daniel 7:14, including this great state. And whereas the Father is said to give Christ all nations in the utmost parts of the earth for his inheritance and possession, and in response, people and their leaders are called to learn and receive instruction from him, Psalm 2:8 and 10, including those in this great state, and presented with a crown and royal robe, Revelation 1:5, 17:14, 19:12 through 13:16. And whereas the founding fathers of this great state begin the Constitution with the words, "We, the people of North Dakota, grateful to Almighty God," as expressed by Reverend R.C. Wiley during the First Constitutional Convention of North Dakota, "we desire there shall be a recognition of Almighty God as the source of authority, of the Lord Jesus Christ as the rightful ruler of nations. Now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of North Dakota, the Senate concurring therein, that North Dakota acknowledge the kingship of Jesus Christ over the world, so that this state may at last receive the great blessings of real liberty, well-ordered discipline, peace, and harmony, and be it further resolved that the Secretary of State forwards copies of this resolution to the President of the United States, the Governor, and each member of the North Dakota Congressional Delegation." Whoa. That, dude, we just keep winning. This last month, the month of January 2025 / the first week of February, we just keep winning. That we have all the time in the world in one hand, and then the other hand, I'm not going to go through that whole thing again, but dude, North Dakota wanting to acknowledge the kingship of Jesus Christ over the whole earth with sound scriptural citations. Like as we have shouted out many times on this platform, this certainly resonates with the theology of not only the reformers or the Christians at the time of our founding, but again, Samuel Davies, his sermon from the 1750s, the mediatorial kingship and glories of Jesus Christ, which we have referenced many times. These are the same passages. These are the same passages that, in other words, Christians for centuries have said serve as the basis that Christ really is the civil magistrate over the nations, and every other lesser civil magistrate needs to confess that that is so in order to truly be blessed. The many of not just the pastors, but even other civil leaders, and of course the citizens at the time of our founding and in the years that followed, were very much aware that the only reason why we won against the strongest military in the world at that time, why we were able to settle this wild landscape with very violent peoples living here before, while we were able to do all these wonderful things, establish a quote-unquote city on a hill, like Winthrop had said in his Mayflower address. The only reason why we were able to do any of those things was because we confessed Christ was king, and we were blessed for it. It's as simple as that. And of course, we had brilliant people, and we're not detracting from the natural gifts which people possessed apart from their salvation in Christ. But nonetheless, there really are attendant blessings and cursings that come with acknowledging the lordship of Christ and his covenant. So great work for friggin' North Dakota. we should shout this from the rooftops. And I really hope that not only does it pass there, but it serves as a template for other states to model. If you guys saw our episode with Louisiana Congressman Dennis Bamberg, he talked about that like many, many times. When good legislation passes in one state, representatives will be basically copy and paste. They'll be like, "Hey, can we use that as a template?" And they do. So that should be our prayer for this North Dakota resolution. You should be praying that. And man, what momentum that could create. That was something that I actually tweeted about today, as there's been a lot of movement from the executive to return certain rights back to the states. So, for example, even before Trump was back in office, his influence through the courts put us in a position whereby the Supreme Court kicked the abortion v. life debate back to the states. Since then, and now coming into office, he is talking about, has said multiple times, and is going to act on it, that the Department of Education is going to come crumbling down, and we're going to kick education back to the states. Yes and amen to all those things. I tweeted, I was like, can we kick back established churches in the respective states, as was the practice at the time of our Constitution? That would be a great state right to kick back to the states. It was stripped from them over time by the Supreme Court. So that would be really neat. It would be really neat. And resolutions like this are a step in the right direction. Cross Politic did an episode briefly discussing this resolution this past week. And one of the questions raised, which was a very natural question to raise, is like, well, what's the point of this if it's a resolution and not a law? Is it still serves as a public document, a civil document, which binds magistrates to an idea, a principle. So imagine this passes, and in a year or so, there's some other kind of abortion controversy, or there's a marriage law being proposed, or there's education law, whatever it may be. Now there would be a resolution to draw back upon and say, hey, look, we have confessed that Christ is king over this state. Is this policy something that Christ would agree with? Is it something he would approve of or not? Resolutions like this are great litmus tests for states and societies. They are great benchmarks, and they can truly hold us accountable. So definitely be praying for the state of North Dakota for this resolution. And that's about all I have to say on that. Other than, I mean, goodness, the quotes in here. You should go quote mining in this. And these are the kind of things, wait, before I even move on to what else happened in North Dakota today, these are the kind of resolutions you should screenshot. You should download this PDF. I'm literally looking at the PDF right now from the North Dakota legislature's website. You should download it, and you should forward it to your state congressman, wherever you're at, and say, hey, this is really neat. we should kick this around. You can change it a little bit how you want, but the essence needs to remain when it comes. And that's a very simple thing to do, folks. Like, a lot of times we, particularly as evangelicals, because we've been given really, really poor political theology and rules of engagement, so to speak, we don't really know what to do with the political realm other than I'll wait for election day. And I know how I'm going to vote, which is good, I mean, praise be to God. But there are other steps in the political you can engage with. Namely, unfortunately, we're usually not the ones calling these people's offices, sending them emails. That's what the liberals do. And it's in large part why they won for decades. But these are the kinds of things, like the North Dakota resolution, these are the kind of things that you should download and email to every single one of your state representatives at the state level and the federal level. Of this is what we're talking about, right? Because if anything, the movement that conservatives have right now, be it a kind of informal populist movement, is still nonetheless something we have to. It's not. Hey, look, it's not perfect. It's not necessarily how I would have drawn it up. Probably not how you would have drawn it up, right? But it's the circumstances God has given us, and we have to operate in that realm. So, anyway, other things that the state of North Dakota has been dealing with, as of today, literally, it's what kept Congressman Rios from joining us this evening, is they had an equal protection bill and law. So for those of you who are still not familiar with that language, when you see quote unquote equal protection law in the news, it's 99% of the time referring to an anti-abortion piece of legislation. The idea draws upon the clauses of the 14th Amendment of equal protection under the law for all persons in the United States, regardless of race, religion, or creed. And the idea is, logically, biblically, historically, that persons, even in the womb, are entitled to the same rights of human dignity that people outside of the womb have, which of course fits very well with the Christian paradigm, because we see life begins at conception, therefore that's a person. That person is entitled to certain legal rights, namely life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so equal protection bills throughout the country have sought to give those same rights legally to unborn children, so that should they be murdered, they would be entitled to the same protections under the law as someone outside the womb is under the law. So if I'm murdered, the person who murdered me faces legal action. These are, again, logical and biblical assertions that are the simple implications of these kinds of laws. Thus, if abortionists abort a baby, they should be punished under the law. This is the logic of equal protection laws because the child is equally protected under the law. So other states are currently fighting their state legislatures for this kind of legislation. I know Texas is working on one, Oklahoma is working on one, and so North Dakota was and is as of right now. But as of today, as this bill, this equal protection bill, was being debated on the floor of the North Dakota legislature, of all people, and this is so sad. This is so sad because this is completely contrary to Christian teaching. So not only was there opposition to this legislation, but it did not come in the form of some blue-haired lady yelling and screaming or some quote-unquote PhD from some liberal university. It was a Catholic. It was my understanding either a priest or some kind of Catholic clergy leader, teacher of some sort, who was criticizing the bill, which is absolutely bonkers because because I have a very high view of Roman Catholics. I have a lot of respect for Roman Catholics, more so than most Protestants, and more so than my Baptist upbringing. But I'm Reformed now, so I like to call myself a Reformed Catholic. But I have a lot of respect for Catholics. But when I see this, I even feel bad for Roman Catholics because whoever this person was, they're not a true representation of true Roman Catholicism. This priest had basically gotten in there and talked about how um, it's not ethical, basically, um, to make women in these instances another victim under the law or whatever, which is nuts because, again, if it logically follows, as the Catholic Church is always taught, as the Christian Church at large is always taught, that, again, to murder a child in the womb is in fact murder, then this is no different than if somebody was in court trying to defend like a serial killer or an actual, like outside the womb murderer, and was like, well, we don't want to make them a victim of the justice system, so yeah, they killed that guy, but we'll just, we'll let him go. But that's not just. God does not smile on that. That's not just. God hates injustice. So, and he hates wickedness. So it was just very sad to see that on the floor of the North Dakota legislature today. I know that those congressmen and those churches and associations which are trying to sponsor and push forward this legislation, I know that was a setback because that's like friendly fire. We're all Christians. We're supposed to be advocating for the same things. Especially if you're Roman Catholic, this is something which has been held as not dogma per se in the strict Roman Catholic sense, but it's been a teaching of the church for 2,000 years. Because not only can you find the principles of this or even the explicit teaching against abortion in the scriptures, but you have documents like the Didache and other early church documents, which and early church fathers describing abortion and abortive activities as prohibited, as sinful. So to see a Roman Catholic testify against other Christians on legislation like this it was disheartening. But hopefully they get that turnaround. I know that's why Congressman Rios, again, couldn't join us because they're working on us. They're working on that fight in North Dakota right now as well. So again, you have two reasons. Who would have thought? You probably, when you hopped on this live stream or you're checking out this video later, it's probably been a while if you don't live in North Dakota. It's probably been a while, maybe the first time in your life that anyone's ever told you should pray for North Dakota. But I've given you two reasons now. Resolution 3020, the Kingship of Christ resolution, and their equal protection law. You should be praying for North Dakota, and praying for other states who are going through different legal battles and legislative battles like these in order to promote good godly virtue, to push us a little bit closer to being a Christian nation again, to being a lesser Christendom or a mere Christendom. So that should be our prayers for North Dakota. That was the topic of the day, the central topic of the day. Please ask any questions that you would like to on that regard. We will transition to foreign policy because, as you may be aware, we finally have a state. We're going to have a state worse than New Jersey, Gaza. No, jokes. We're not going to make Gaza the 51st state, but apparently, we are acquiring Gaza, which is whatever that means. So. So many cans of worms to get into, folks. I mean, good grief. My emphasis in college was in not just foreign policy, but it was specifically the Middle East. So the craziest class I ever took was literally it was the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as an entire course. And behind me sat an exchange student from the Israeli Defense Force, from the IDF. And in front of me sat a girl whose parents were Palestinian refugees. So it was an explosive class, if you will. But I learned a ton. I learned a ton in that class and classes like it. I took, like I said, I took several Middle East focused courses in my time back in college. And it's one of those things when you're a nerd, you're really tempted to go, like, I would love to go, all the way back to the first Zionist Congress of 1897 or whatever. And I would love to take you through the timeline of like the last several hundred years, which has led to our president saying, Gaza's ours, we're taking Gaza. Like, I would love to, but we don't have the time for that. And you probably don't care. It's maybe there could be, maybe one day I could have somebody on the show to go through all of that with me, the history of Gaza, if you will, or that is really just the state of Israel being in the Levant, in that region in the Middle East. That would be a that's one that you, if you're not familiar with it, you probably have tons of presuppositions with it because that's just American culture. So you have to like slowly wade into all of just the facts, let alone the rhetoric, let alone the bias from either side. Because as Americans and as Christians, like there is very much a way in which you don't have to give in to the emotions of either the Palestinian Arab Muslim side of things or the Israeli slash Jewish side of things. There is a Christian way of looking at this, but the best way to approach that is by going through the history and just looking at the facts. And we don't have time for that today. But looking forward, what look, that's basically all me just dodging the all the history that's involved with the struggle in the Levant. But us getting involved in this way is very interesting. So when you look at the history of U.S. involvement in these conflicts, so State of Israel comes around in 1947. You have wars right off the bat. You have wars again in the 50s, and then you have the Six Days War in 1967. And then you have the Yom Kippur War in 1973. So virtually every decade, there was, for the first 30, 40 years of the State of Israel's existence, you had wars with Arabs, with Palestinians, with Muslims. Um, not exclusively over conflicts in Gaza, but over all kinds of issues. Um, and so then after 1973, the surrounding Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, they're like, you know what, we're going to take a break from our involvement militarily in these things. And Palestinians in Gaza or the West Bank, uh, they didn't like that. So you had other conflicts that proceeded through the 80s and 90s. You had the first and second intifadas, which were basically other terrorist uprisings, civilian uprisings, and then you just and it's we're blazing through so much history. But in terms of U.S. involvement and trying to settle this thing, you had Jimmy Carter tried a lot with the Camp David Accords, and then or was that the Camp David Accords? I know that Jimmy Carter got involved and then Clinton got involved. Clinton actually almost settled the whole thing. Believe it or not, old Bill, right? He was definitely busy in the White House, but Bill almost fixed the thing. Um, if I remember correctly, he almost had the territories they would have been realigned to the pre-67 agreement, 1967 agreement, um, and would have given the Palestinians their own state that would have been recognized as a functional governance. But the problem was, and this was Yasser Arafat was the one who denied, who walked away from this deal. The problem was is that they were going to have to single-handedly give Jerusalem over to Israel, and they were like, absolutely not, and thus the busy more ways than one. This is right, Jimmy. Um, and so he walked out, and then you have the early 2000s, and then bringing us up to today, right? So the reason why I bring this up is for two reasons. Because we need to talk about U.S. involvement and what has worked, what hasn't worked, what the heck are we going to do now, um, and we need to talk about the theological issues at stake here. Now, as Christians, we should care that the state of Israel has been slaughtering Palestinian Christians and destroying some of the oldest churches on the planet, whether they be in Gaza or at the Lebanese border. That should concern you. Um, it should also concern you that as Christians, we're gonna we're in such a pickle because one of the things people don't understand about the Middle East is it's never just like the thing right now. Turns out when you slaughter people or when there's violent wars from people that they don't like, they will just raise more and more generations of terrorists. And so taking this conflict out of the picture for a second, let's just go back to the Arab Spring in 2011, which was a series of uprisings across the Middle East that saw the shakings of entire governances. Whether it started um, in Libya with Gaddafi, um, and then you had turmoil in Algeria, and then of course you have the outbreak of the Syrian civil war, and all these other things. But the reason why I bring up that is because in the Syrian civil war, Arab Spring going to 2014. Now you've got ISIS emerging in the region trying to establish a caliphate. They take over portions of Iraq and Syria, and we go and do our thing. Trump 1.0 goes and we bombed the hell out of them. That guy. And and so then what happens though is post ISIS, you have refugee camps all across the region, like one, for example, called Al Hol in northeast Syria, that had 5 million children from slaughtered ISIS, like dead ISIS fighters. It was their kids and those mothers being fed on nothing but water and UN rice. And that was, and they're still there. And that's just how the situation is. No one had a plan. No one has a plan. So as you can imagine, and I'm not a rocket surgeon, but it's probably going to create more terrorists. And their situation that's just from ISIS and the Syrian civil war. How much more when you displace 2 million people and an ancestral homeland they've been at, for ages. So it just we don't really think about the long term consequences. Sometimes it appears maybe we've got more in the bag. I don't know, but it just looks like this is a temporary solution, perhaps. Maybe who knows? Maybe we'll turn it to a nice waterfront property. We'll get some good casinos, maybe a Texas Roadhouse out in Gaza. I don't know, but just upon those bases alone, like it's not. I'm not optimistic. I'm like 60-40 on it with respect to 60%. This is a bad idea for all kinds of reasons. 40%. I told you we get to theology. We'll circle back to it. I'm on a tangent right now. 40% of like, okay, but everything else has been going great so far. So maybe in this administration in 2 weeks, so maybe there is some kind of crazy plan and state, at hand, and somehow it'll benefit us and the region. Who knows? We should be prioritizing us, which is also why I'm like 60% this is a bad thing because I don't want more involvement in the Middle East. It's been so long, particularly for Westerners. We've been doing this for 1,000 years now. We need a break. But anywho, the Gaza beachfront Airbnbs. My boy. Yeah, the Airbnbs in Gaza are about to go crazy. You get your own tunnel. Anyway, the chat's going crazy. Um, so I'm not too optimistic. Now the theological aspects you need to understand. Sorry, so I don't even know how I got on the tangent, but let's go back to Yasser Arafat walking away from the deal in the 90s with Clinton and the Israelis. So yes, there are elements to this that are clearly just ethnic hatred between the two groups. They have no problem killing each other. History bears fruit. Sorry, folks. I don't write the mail. I just deliver it. There's a lot of ethnic hatred between those two groups. There's historical trauma. There is all kinds of socioeconomic reasons why you would have impoverished masses who want to throw off the shackles of people who have more than them. So there's a lot of factors here that contribute to this conflict. A lot of those actually can be settled by policy and structural changes. But the one that you cannot just legislate away is the fact that you have two groups. It's not every single person in these respective groups, right? Because there's a lot of secular Jews and there's a lot of secular Muslims who could care less about what their culture's theology holds. But so far as Muslims and Jews are concerned, it's the whole reason why Arafat walked away from the deal in the 90s. Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa Mosque or the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, right? Like, who's going to win out? And it's no secret, the state of Israel really just wants entire control of Jerusalem, and it's the third holiest site in Islam. So it's a very odd predicament for both groups because if anyone really messes with Jerusalem, it's World War III so far as that region's concerned. And so until Western policymakers understand that, like, I don't know what's going to happen with this situation. This was not on my bingo card. It is a plot twist to see what the heck. I mean, what are we going to do with Gaza? But who, I don't know about that. But what I do know is that Israel's not going to stop until they have entire control of Jerusalem. That includes Al Aqsa Mosque, and the Arab world, the Islamic world, is not going to let that happen. So what is going to happen? Who knows? I have no idea what that will look like in the next 10, 20, 50 years. We have no idea what's going to happen with Gaza in the next 5 minutes, but it's this is why I loved studying the Middle East in college, because I was like, dude, it's explosive. It's always there's always something going on. So anyway, the will chat. Sorry, the Instagram chat is I'll get to the questions at the end. That's I just got asked about the red heifer. I'm not a dispensation, which is great. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because so that's a theological aspect so far as policy is concerned that policymakers should take into account, that like this is not merely just socioeconomic, geographical, political. Because some people have tried to make it purely political, of like, oh well, if Israel will just absorb the Palestinians and give them either their autonomous zone or certain political rights, they'll be fine. There's so much to that, why it's not that simple, demographically, politically, etc. But until we understand the theological, then none of the policy back and forth is going to mean a thing, at least in my humble opinion. Now, Christians, this is going to be a hot take for most of you, because most of us grew up dispensationals. We could there is going to be a really hot take for anyone who is not familiar with classic Protestant teaching. There is no inherent spiritual value to Jerusalem. Oh. All right, hold on, everybody, hold on to something. There's historical value. There's supreme historical value, more so than any other place on the planet. Like, no doubt, because it's a place where Christ lived, walked, died, and resurrected. But spiritual value, there's no more spiritual value there than any other place. Let me explain before you throw something at me, right? So just read Luther, just read Calvin, just read any of the reformers, most of the reformers, that is. There is no, uh, there is no more sacred dirt in Jerusalem than anywhere else on the planet. Historically, though, it is the most important place because of the life and resurrection of Christ, the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. But in terms of spiritual, Christians, particularly in America, have been taught for the last 150 years that the Holy Land is in fact more holy, as if there's like a scale, and like, Las Vegas is here and Jerusalem's here. No, because God destroyed the temple in 70 AD, and the church is Israel. The church is Israel. I hate when people say the new Israel. The church always has been Israel. The church always has been Israel, even before Israel was Israel. What do I mean by that? Christians, the church, are those who have placed their faith and trust in the promises of the triune God. So Abraham, right? Abraham, Father Abraham, had many sons, trusted upon the promises of God, covenanted with God. He was not Jewish. He was not an Israeli. He was not an Israelite. It's funny how all those terms actually refer to different things. Fun studying politics. He was a Christian. He believed in the promises of God by faith. Ethnically, he was Canaanite of some variant thereof, or Sumerian thereof. But it's his later sons, you get his descendants, you get Jacob, changed his name to Israel, and then he has 12 sons, and only one of them, Judah, right? From Judah, comes the Judeans, or the Jews, over time, right? So you had centuries of the people of God, the church, that were not Jewish, right? They were Christians nonetheless. So the church has been around since the garden. The church has been around since Genesis 3:15. Those who believe in the promises of God are Christians. They believe in the true triune God, holding out on his promises by faith, that in the fullness of time Christ came and died for all of his people. Ephesians 1, the book of Hebrews, etc. So with God destroying the temple in 70 AD as a judgment to the old Israel, again, I don't like that terminology, but the people at that time, it was a casting off of the old ceremonial order and establishing in the new covenant in Christ. The olive tree, great passage for this, Romans 11, the olive tree blossoms with the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And we as Gentiles were grafted onto that tree. Now it is our tree. Now we have been. It's almost as if we have always been a part of this tree, and there's different arguments to be made. But the point is, the point is that there, because of all those things, that the church is Israel, that we are now the temples of the Holy Spirit, not a physical temple anywhere, right? Not the tabernacle, but we, the church, is where God dwells. There is not a need for a third temple. There's never going to be a third temple. People tried in history, and God smote them. Um, because of those things, Christ specifically tells the woman at the well that there will come a day in which people will not worship at this temple or that temple or on this hill or on that hill, but the true worshipers of God will worship him in spirit and in truth anywhere, right? Because God has fulfilled all these things, right? There is not going to be, and there will never be a third temple. We should not hope for that. If this is all unfamiliar to you, this episode is not served to be some kind of tutorial on these things. You should just go read classic Protestants, what Protestants of the Reformation were saying. Not even that. Just go read even further back. Go read Athanasius on the Incarnation. He spends a great deal talking about this. Read Augustine. Read other church fathers. This was pretty universal for a long time, for centuries, in fact. So I am sorry if this is the first time you're hearing this and now you're really angry at me. I'm a chill guy. I'm just a chill guy who loves the Bible and church history. So don't get mad at me. Just go research it. I know it sounds crazy. That being said, going forward, the Gaza situation, don't be manipulated by this just with Israel in general. Don't be manipulated by innovative theology from 150 to 200 years ago, namely dispensationalism, that holds that we're waiting for a third temple and the statehood of Israel in 1947, 1948 has some kind of prophetic fulfillment. Those are very novel ideas. They are new ideas in the life of Christianity. So, if nothing else, even if you disagree with me, go look and see what Christians said for a long, long time. So that way, when you run into folks like me who are like, hey guys, we don't have some kind of spiritual obligation to the state of Israel, or Gaza for that matter, you don't throw apples at me. You just go and rest upon historic theology. So go investigate that. But that's why we shouldn't be manipulated by poor theology. Just simply learn better theology. But that's something you have to keep in mind with this foreign policy issue. So now we're back on that. We went on a lot of different. I went on a lot of different rabbit trails with that one, but it's fascinating. I don't know what the heck's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to work out well for us, but who knows? Who knows? Maybe it could be a nice little beachfront property for the U.S. Maybe it's somewhere we're going to send illegals. Maybe it's somewhere we're going to send criminals. I have no idea. I have no idea what they're going to do with it, but we will stand by and see what the heck happens, and we'll comment more on it further. But what I wanted to contribute to the Gaza conversation was the theological aspect of understanding the theology that's really at stake for Israelis and Palestinians, as well as Christians, where it's like, hey, don't buy into any of it. Don't buy into it. We need to prioritize taking care of our nation before any of this. So anyway, moving on with that, man, if recommendations, I wish I could provide a ton of recommendations for looking into the Gaza situation. My professor in college, who I took 2 courses from on just these topics alone, was Deborah Wheeler. She was a nutty lady, very knowledgeable, very fun to be around. Learned a ton from her, though. I had her for a class on Saudi Arabia and for the Israeli-Palestinian issue. Learned a ton. And I wish I could tell you what textbooks we were looking into, because I want to be able to recommend them to you. But man, I'm blanking on what books to recommend. Historians, you can't. Oh man, it's tough. Well, the good thing is that this is actually an issue that, because if you just look at the facts from paleo-conservatives, I'd recommend probably looking from a paleo-conservative lens, or even there are some centrists and some leftists who get the facts right. They get the facts right. They don't get the implication of those facts right. But in other words, just get into this, study it for yourself, have an intelligible opinion about the facts of this conflict before, like, for example, here's an example of what not to do. We laughed at this in the class. So we pulled up a clip of AOC, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, whatever. She was asked about the Palestinian situation, should they have statehood or not, and she had no idea. She was like, yeah, Israel needs to stop killing Palestinians. And then they asked her, okay, well, are you in favor of a one-state solution, a two-state solution? She had no idea what they were talking about. She had no recommendation. She had no because obviously she didn't, right? Because there's plenty of politicians like that, but especially her, right? Like she had no idea. So don't be one of those people where you have an opinion for which you've done actually no research whatsoever, nor have any actual grasp at the real issues at stake, um, et cetera, et cetera. So don't do that. I guess that's something you can get out of this conversation. But we will move on to questions, and it looks like there's plenty on Instagram. So let me scroll through. I apologize, guys. Let me scroll through these comments again. I was dying. I saw my boy uh, Brooks talking about beachfront properties. This is gonna be nuts. I think the idea of a Gaza casino is a bad idea. It'll be explosive. Yeah, man. I don't know. I will say this. Maybe that's Trump's play. He's a big casino guy, and he knows that uh, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Oman, uh, and oh, Bahrain, like they have their own little honey holes in terms of gambling, which Muslims are not supposed to gamble. They're not supposed to drink. They're not supposed to do all these things. But there are a lot. If you've noticed, there are oh, got to be careful with noticing. Anyway, um, there's a lot of places to have fun in the Middle East, like for millionaires. It's all that oil money and all kinds of money, I'm sure, from totally legal and righteous means. But anyway, um, maybe that's the get like the angle. Like Trump wants to put a little fun land, little paradise island on the Gaza Strip that can compete with some of those larger areas. Probably not. But don't be surprised when there's a Trump Tower over there or a horseshoe, a casino or anything. Let's see. The All right, Jimmy's a Lutheran. Good, so he agrees with what I was saying about the eschatology, or whatever. Let's see. Oh, the I got a guy that's a historic premill. Historic premills confuse me because it's like I totally get the affinity, the desire to want to believe what first century Christians believe. Obviously, like who's gonna not? I mean, actually, poor question because there's probably plenty of Christians today who could care less what Christians in the first century believe. But most rational people would say, "Huh, we should probably see how Christianity was done in the first century, so that way we can try to have an authentic Christian witness, life, faith, and practice, etc., etc." The only problem is, it's like when you go and see what second, third, and fourth century Christians said about those Christians, said about that theology, namely, was they are basically in so many words saying, "Hey, they just misunderstood," and who can blame them? Like if you had a friend, if you're a Christian at the very early second century, and your friend was neighbors with a guy who literally saw Jesus, right? Like, yes, I no one's going to develop amillennialism or postmillennialism right there. Like you're going to think he's going to bodily come back like at any moment because I mean they saw him, they walked with him, they talked with him. But when you look at like what Athanasius had to say, what Augustine had to say, what even guys like Origen had to say, who was nuts, Tertullian, other people, is like they basically in so many words are like they were just a product of their time and circumstance. They were wrong. Here's why this theology, we need to improve upon it because there's some crucial misunderstandings here that we can stand to correct. And I think that that's certainly what happened through the centuries with regard to our eschatological view of understanding what was accomplished by Christ ascending to the throne of David. That all that being said, you did have many church fathers from that point for the duration of church history across the traditional spectrum in the East and the West with Protestants who were like, we don't need a third temple. We should not want a third temple. That's what they were arguing. So I can understand. But let's see. Let's see. Man, there's some good debates happening in the chats. I'm sorry, I should inform you guys. They're arguing about you got a pre-mill and a Lutheran. A pre-mill and a Lutheran walk into a bar. They're arguing about the temple in the future. So total, totally typical conversation between Christians. Let's see. Let's see. They're talking about Barron Trump based. Oh, geez, what did I do? Oh no, the heck is this? I just totally ruined my Instagram live stream. What the heck? I changed myself into a banana and I can't fix it. Okay, there. Oh, thank God. All right, let's see. All right, so they're arguing about eschatology, and then my man Brooks actually drops a real question: tariffs. Suddenly, everyone is an expert on foreign trade policies. Do you have a stance on DJT's approach? Oh man, good thing we got more time left. Tariffs. I am a true Southerner. Tariffs are what partially destroyed the South. So I have a very, I I am usually not friendly with the idea of tariffs. I think they can do harm to certain regions of the country far more than others. They can have a disproportionate effect negatively on different industries, different communities, etc. Right now, though, I mean, it is it's hard to argue with the results. Like so far, I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, right? And eggs are still really expensive. So be that as it may, but with respect to uh, the leather in the back, looks good. Sorry, I'm being distracted by the comments. But tariffs, with respect to what they're doing right now, by you see that they're a bargaining chip. Trump getting Colombia to stand up straight, getting Mexico and Canada to do what we want as well. You could have a very cynical view, a black pill view of okay, but this was all prearranged. That this was all political show arranged beforehand. Um, and some people would point to the fact that the legislation that Canada has passed for their quote unquote border act was actually announced back in December. So they're like, see, like Trump didn't really do anything. This is all political theater. It's all show. That it's all arranged beforehand. Even if that's the case, which I'm not really sure if that's really feasible, if that's really true. I'd say probably. Oh no, we got Yankees in the chat. That's a shame. Um, the goodness. Sorry that now I'm thinking about Gettysburg. Uh, many such cases. Um, Even if we suppose some kind of cynical black pill view, I think the chances of that are very slim. But dealing with that would be to use more reformed theological language. Those would be in the secret decrees of God and or secrets that you and I just don't know. We don't know what these people are actually doing. What we can see is favorable. Can't blame people for being you can't blame people for being attracted to what has happened for the U.S. in the last 2 weeks with respect to foreign policy. So tariffs, I mean, we'll see. We will see. I think it's a barter. It's a barter for sure. It could, like I said, it could hit certain communities and certain industries very hard in America. But who knows? With the utilization of the what are they going to call it? The External Revenue Service that could serve. I don't know what their true function will be. Trump hasn't necessarily stated that, but if it is to subsidize those adversely affected industries, that could be a good check and balance economically for um, maintaining the tariffs. So who knows? Who knows? At the end of the day, um, like I said, I have my concerns historically, but that which can allow for the common man to provide for his family more effectively and efficiently, I'm all for it. So if that comes through other economic reform, so be it. I definitely think you can't do tariffs in a vacuum. So like if we're gonna do the tariffs, get rid of the income tax. He's flirted with it. That would be phenomenal. Don't stop there either. Cutting U.S. aid has been phenomenal. Keep it up. Slash it all. We don't need it. We need to empower the American people, not constantly rob them of the fruits of their labor and allow the government to take more from us than God takes in the tithe. Um, so I'm all for it. Keep it up. I don't know if anyone has any more policy questions. Brooks, I appreciate that. I don't even know if you're still in about tariffs. We've got about 10 more minutes, folks. Let's see. Oh, yeah, of course. So, anyway, back on eschatology. Yeah, without a doubt, there's plenty of early church fathers that were understandably premill because they, like I said, I mean, if you're Polycarp, Irenaeus, Ignatius, right? Like they were within living memory or knew people within living memory of John the Apostle, right? So, um, and I can't remember. I always get Irenaeus and Ignatius confused for which one was actually taught by John, but nonetheless, only proves the point that, like, yes, it's understandable that they would have been pre-mill because of all the timing. But anywho, let's see what other questions we got. Oh, thank God. Okay, you might be a Yankee, but you got Scots Irish blood. That's okay. From Jimmy. Thoughts on your response if Israel did build a third temple just because? So the good thing about that is, at least even what so Luther talked about this in a controversial book that I won't name. He basically says, like, even if that comes to pass, it will have no spiritual meaning. It will have no prophetic meaning. They will try to sell you on that. They'd probably try other kind of psyops to convince you that something was happening in the world, but don't buy it. It's because the problems that come from that are huge theologically in terms of understanding what Christ has accomplished. Now, I know there are some premills who say that, well, no, the whole point isn't so that we worship at that temple, but that basically the Antichrist can do their thing there, desecrate, etc., and then Christ will come back and bodily reign there. Gary North had an interesting critique of this, him and Gary DeMar in Christian Reconstruction, What It Is and What It Isn't, where he basically, like, the idea that Christ would bodily reign in a physical single location on the earth, um, would be, he said, it creates a weird bureaucratic dilemma because if he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords that he is, how so is he going to have to discharge a number of lesser magistrates across the planet to mobilize the largest bureaucracy that has ever been conceived in the history of ever? Well, probably not. That's probably not in the cards. It's unlike that which is revealed from scripture and in history. So it was interesting. I can't remember all of the points of his argument, but that was basically the premise of his argument of, no, that's not what the scriptures are getting at with the bodily return for the resurrection. Let's see. What other questions we got, folks? We got 52 minutes. I got 7 minutes. I got 7 more minutes. Oh man, I know I rambled a lot about Gaza, but I mean, it's just a crazy situation. I will say there's other great foreign policy moves this week that are probably to go unnoticed. A lot of Americans were caught off guard, for example, with like the Panama situation, not recognizing how important that is, and how huge it is that we have convinced Panama to not go along with the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative for China. Now, if you don't know what the Belt and Road Initiative is, you need, dude, it's 2025. Like you gotta learn what the Belt and Road Initiative is. So America in the post-war era we have primarily projected our power militarily, at least our presence, that is. Of course, we've expanded our markets. We're without a doubt the largest economy on the planet. Um, but we have, for the most part, projected and or secured our presence globally through military power. China has expanded their presence through economic power, um, for the most part, across Eurasia, into Africa, into South America. Heck, even in America, they've got like 350,000 acres in America. Whose idea was that? I don't know. They need to be put in jail. Um, but they have asserted their economic presence all over the planet, and that's the way in which they're going to have to survive. No kidding. People don't realize China imports 80% of their food and energy because that massive land mass with so many people, only 6% of that land is arable. 6%, only 6% of it is fertile for feeding their people. So obviously they have to import. And the problem for them is, particularly in their region, none of their neighbors really want to do business with them, or at least historically they haven't. And so the BRI is the way through which they are literally establishing um, lanes of commerce, physically lanes of commerce, be it by road or rail, across Eurasia into Africa, and establishing trade routes all over the planet to keep themselves alive. And usually, what this looks like is they will go to some third world nation and they'll be like, hey, you guys want some malls? You guys want some new roads? You want some government buildings? We'll build them for you for like 99 cents. However, the interest is, something crazy for the next 900 years. So they get them into these deals that they literally never going to be able to get out of. And so all the while, now China has a presence in said country and they leapfrog. They keep going from city to city, from nation to nation, etc. And now they're all over the place. In many cases, in many senses, we are on the back foot in that regard. Crazy things have come out of that though, and nations still get into agreements with them. Like literally, the African Union, Africa having 55 nations, has a union very similar to the EU. And I can't remember where their headquarters is, if it's in Zimbabwe or wherever it is. They had China build the building, and within 2 years, they found out the whole building was bugged. Would you look at that? You know, who would have thought China, you know. And then Europe, then you had Europe a couple years ago, Trump 1.0. They were like, oh, we should get in, you know, these Chinese telecommunications, like Chinese AT&T, basically the Huawei, and we should get their power lines and their antennas and their satellites. And some European nations were like, yeah, that's a bad idea. And sure enough, it was and is. And so anyway, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, folks. The point is, by getting Panama to say no to that is huge, because we still had a lot of room to go. I mean, there's so many South American partners for China, but if we could start winning those people back, that would be great. We have our own sphere of influence on this hemisphere. We'd like to keep it that way. They can go play in Southeast Asia for all they want, but over here, we should get back to a nice Monroe Doctrine where this hemisphere is ours, economically, politically, and we would like everyone else to stay out. So that'd be nice. But anyway, so you've got to look into that situation. That's a huge foreign policy move in the last week. We've got about 4 minutes. Let's see. If I could, I don't even know this guy's first name. He's asking about Luther's view of the Roman Catholic Church. If you could clarify that question, that'd be sick, brother. Anybody else have any questions? I'm very grateful you guys didn't see this on Twitter and or YouTube. For whatever reason, the live stream on Instagram, I clicked the emoji button and on accident. So I was a banana for about 30 seconds. That was awful. I'm glad you guys didn't have to see that on these other platforms. Hey, Naomi, she waved. Very nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. Well, folks, if we don't have any questions in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and call it early. You guys have been great. The chat this was the most interactive chat we've had. Jimmy says, can I blow down the third temple like the big bad wolf? Yes, you can. Go ahead, please. Anyway, so you guys have been great. The chat has been most interactive. This third live stream in than any other live stream. So you guys are the best. And to you, I say a good evening. I wish you a good evening. But as for the rest of you guys, like I said, stay tuned for next week. We will have Congressman Nico Rios. We will have a video for you, whether it be live or pre-recorded. It will drop next Wednesday or maybe Thursday morning, discussing the North Dakota resolution that we covered at the beginning of this episode. So at any rate, you guys stay frosty. Have a good one. Thank you for all that you do. And this has been the political. Oh, no. I killed it. I was trying to play the little video to get out of here, but here we still are. Here we go. All right. This has been the Politico Christiana podcast. You guys take care. Thank you for being the best, and crush the serpent.
There is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry.